DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
The British and Irish Lions are on their way. The tour officially starts this weekend. Saturday morning, New Zealand time. What a great time to watch a game of rugby at 7 a.m. And that's the British and Irish Lions playing Argentina at the Aviva Stadium in Ireland. And then off to Oz in the first match against the Force in about 6 weeks' time, first of 3 tests. Iain Payten from the Sydney Morning Herald joins us again. Welcome back, mate.
G'day, how are we?
Well, much looking forward to this, but not as much as you are, I bet.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming. Obviously, you wait for 12 years for these things and probably start talking about them 3 or 4 years out. So, no, it'll be great. Can't wait.
I can't remember what happened in 2013 then in that case. What did happen in that series?
Curly Bill slipped over in the first test with a kick to win. You remember up in Brisbane?
Yes, that's right.
Then Australia won the second one in Melbourne, and then it was a bit of a flogging in the third one in Sydney. Warren Gatland went back to all his Welshmen, and they got the job done pretty thoroughly in 2013. That was that was the end of Robbie Deans too. That was his last test in charge of the Wallabies.
How big is this going to be in Australia, and how big is it going to be for Australian rugby?
Big on both fronts. There's obviously, the Lions story pretty well. They travel in huge packs. I think they're expecting like 40,000 people from the UK just inbound, travellers, tourists, all the rest of it. They obviously couldn't go and watch the last one in South Africa in 2021. So, the telling of the story goes that they've saved up all their shekels and are all coming down to Australia en masse. So, and then, half of the UK lives in Australia these days anyway. So, they'll come out en masse from locally as well. As far as for Australian rugby, huge. The game struggles on a couple of fronts financially and just in the public sentiment. Financially, they're expecting it's a joint venture these days. So I think they've already struck a deal. I think they're going to earn something like 100 million Aussie.
Wow.
Which is going to basically Australian rugby, to get out of the post-COVID sort of disaster, took on a fair bit of debt. So that they took on, I think it was in total about 80 million Australian debt just to be able to get through these years. So they'll be able to pay that down is the plan.
Yep.
And then the World Cup is apparently going to bank another 100 million, and then you can start to spend that. So that's the financial picture, hugely important for Australian rugby on a financial front and just in a public sentiment sense as well. It's trench warfare over here as far as staying in the public eye, getting in the public eye, staying in the public eye, and just being a dominant player in the national conversation. And for a month, 6 weeks at least, that will be rugby in Australia. So they have to make hay while the sun shines, as I say.
Yeah, look, I was lucky enough to spend a week up in Queensland a couple of weeks ago, and I picked up a Courier Mail one morning, and this was on the semi-final where the Reds were playing, quarterfinal, Reds were playing in Christchurch, and I went through 17 pages of sports news, mate. It took me to page 11 to get anything on it. So, look, it's just, a couple of things here. It's not just the rugby and the games that, and hopefully it's going to be a really competitive series, but it's just seeing that red everywhere, isn't it? That's what's actually going to. Even if you don't know anything about sport, if you live in any of those big cities, you are not going to be able to not notice all of this around you.
Yeah, it's huge. Every pub is full from 9 a.m. onwards. That's probably a bit unkind, but certainly on game day, the red swarm just kind of dominates the city, doesn't it? People have been talking about it for a long time. Even people who don't necessarily follow rugby are asking, about it, and can we get hands on tickets and that sort of thing. So, as I say, it's kind of it's a huge beast of its own, and we're, I don't know what the right word is, lucky, I suppose, that these Lions tours kind of exist and can bring a huge amount of attention and people interested punters and fans and stuff down to the country and kind of celebrate rugby for a little bit.
Look, you've got an Ashes tour coming as well, and the same thing kind of happens, doesn't it? It's probably a bit smaller scale, but the same thing kind of happens. What else brings that amount of people to a city who are just spending money? I call it the funny money, the free money. They're spending it on cabs and Ubers and as you say, grog and restaurants and hotels, and so the economy gets a massive boost as well. It's not just Australian rugby. The vibe is good whenever the Lions are in town. They're a good bunch of fans, man. I mean, they've got a good sense of humour. And all of that. Plus, hopefully we get to see a fantastic series. And, are the other matches going to be competitive? Are the Super Rugby sides going to be competitive with them or not?
Some will, some won't. It's always a bit of a mixed bag. It kind of depends on how many, players go up to the Wallabies, for example. That's a bit of a topic of conversation, as it always is. Which guys will be allowed to stay back and play for their states? Which guys will be kind of quarantined up in the Wallabies camp or the test squad sort of thing. I'd expect New South Wales and Queensland will put up a decent battle. The Brumbies beat the Lions the last time they were here, so it's always a difficult assignment. And once, the Brumbies will have a fair contingent of Wallabies, obviously, but cold night down in Canberra, that's always a place where the Lions seem to struggle a little bit. Some of those other kind of scratch matches, the Pacifica game and the AUNZ game, still a bit of an unknown quantity there. I think the Force funnily enough, the Force will probably have the most Wallabies players because it's at the very start of the tour. So they could be more competitive. They've been walkovers in the past, those Force games at the start of the tour, but they'll probably put in their best effort yet, I'd say.
Iain, in terms of how competitive the Wallabies will be, because we'll be looking at that, with a microscope from this side of the Tasman, obviously, looking forward to how Australia is going to play, what that then means for the Rugby Championship, the Bledisloe Cup and things, and looking at Super Rugby this year, despite the New Zealand dominance, and I'll finish the conversation by asking about that final, but, we always think you can pick 30 players, maybe 35 players. Do you have enough to make it a really competitive squad that can challenge this Lions team? Because we know how they're going to play. They're going to play probably pretty much like Ireland have done, under Farrell, which is, you've seen a lot of this. I saw it at the World Cup as well. It's very patterned rugby. It's to a system. It's players that know that system and they just keep grinding away at you. So how competitive will Australia be?
I think more competitive than people are giving, in the past year or two have been predicting. As you say, the Wallabies have traditionally been able to put out, a pretty decent 15 when they're doing well. It's a good 23 when they're doing very well. It's a good 35. Now, where we're at, I think that, currently the best team that they can put on the field and probably the best 23 is going to be pretty competitive. We saw pretty promising stuff on the spring tour where they beat England, beat Wales and went pretty close against Ireland, which is probably the best barometer of how things will go in this Lions tour. And you've got Joe Schmidt, obviously, one of your great coaches who knows the island pattern inside out. He wrote the book, So I think what we saw last year was, when you think about it, pretty incredible that he got them to a point as quickly as he did where they were competitive on that spring tour. I know they lost 2 games, but it's kind of like racehorse terms. You're always looking for the next run, aren't you? And I think he has got them to a position where they understand, good basic structured rugby, what is required of them to be in the fight for long periods. And we also saw the Wallabies, coming back from deficits, so that's stuff that we haven't seen in a long, long time. Oftentimes when you got on top of the Wallabies, you stayed on top and you run up a score, So I'm not as pessimistic as others have been. It's funny. People over here talk about, they won't ever say it out loud, but Rugby Australia, that the one test that needs to be won is that first test in Brisbane, right? Because you win that and you've got a decider automatically. Right. So that's the other part. Who's gonna turn up and be able to be cohesive in the first test? The Lions are obviously a brand new team. That's it's an overlooked part that they struggle with, is just putting a team together. And the Wallabies just won't have played a lot of test matches. They've got a warm-up game in inverted commas, against Fiji, a couple of weeks out. But then they'll just, straight into business. So I suspect that Joe Schmidt will just kind of roll out a pretty similar team to what we saw at the end of last year, and hope that cohesion and that, that good form that they were able to piece together at the back end of last year, that they can kind of just rediscover that pretty quickly.
Finally, who wins the Super Rugby final?
It's hard to go past the Crusaders. The Chiefs have been very good, but how do you beat the Crusaders in Christchurch? It's nigh on impossible. They've been a pretty good story, really. You need to check what was in the water from last year. They were awful last year. Just didn't get much right at all. To their credit, they stuck with Rob Penny, didn't they? And rediscovered things pretty quickly. So there's a lesson there for administrators about how to deal with
a bad season,
one-off year. But yeah, I mean that's a pretty impressive record. What is it now? 31 wins.
31-0, pal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see that being another Crusaders win. I don't know if Rob Penny breakdances, does he? But it'd be interesting to see him try.
This is the DSPN.